All right, what's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode. I'm Swipa Cam, and we got not one, but episode 2 with Jason Timpf, host of Hoops Tonight with the Volume. Jason, how's everything going today, brother?
I'm doing good, man. I can't complain. I have to say I had a little moment yesterday when I was watching those games because it'd been, what, a week since we had some good NBA basketball, and there were so many good games yesterday, starting with your guys' Nuggets getting into Cleveland and getting a big win. I got to tell you, man, I'm as excited for this next 3 months as I've ever been for a final stretch of an NBA season. But I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm excited to talk some basketball today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's funny, Jason, is me and a group of other people, shout out to Facts and Stats community, Twitter Spaces and stuff as well. We were talking before the season started, like we could have the healthiest playoff run we've had in years. And I mean, but Jason, I even think about this where not just even like the last few years, but even before the Warriors got KD. When's the last time we had where you didn't have a team where it's like, all right, Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, nobody beating them? Like, when's the last time we had a playoff run where you could literally look at the West and the East and you could say, you could legitimately make an argument for maybe 7 teams winning a championship? I don't remember the last time we had that.
Yeah, I would say at least 5 like real contenders, right? Like I go with like Phoenix and Denver, and then the Bucks, the Celtics, and the Sixers. And then there's like this tier below them that I wouldn't want to face in a series. Like, I don't know about you, but the Lakers look pretty damn good their last couple games. I wouldn't want to see them. The Warriors, I still would not be interested in playing in a 7-game series. The Clippers, I mean, obviously the Russell Westbrook thing is weird, but the Clippers are going to be a pain too. Like, yeah, you're right. It's wide open. There's no clear-cut favorite. Every team has flaws, and that just makes it more interesting. And to your point, to this point, knock on wood, I'm a little mad at you because you kind of jinxed us a little bit, but at this point, it does appear that everyone's shaping up to be healthy in time.
Well, look, I'm not going to lie to you. After watching the last couple of playoffs, no Murray for the Nuggets, but then even like that 2021 run, I'm talking about you got Anthony Davis in the first round, not available. Jamal Murray, second round, not available. You get to the third round, and you're still missing Kawhi Leonard. And then you go to the Eastern Conference, there's no James Harden, there's no Kyrie Irving. I mean, it was just a mess. And then, we got last year where there's no Chris Middleton and Giannis, and I watched Giannis. Jason, I watched Giannis put up 44, 20, and 6 in a game 6, and then I watched him put up 25, 20, and 9. But then you just like, if Chris Middleton is here, it's this team, do they take it all the way to the top? So I genuinely I'm just very excited because I think it's just been years since we've seen it. Even the 2018-19 Warriors, Kevin Durant wasn't there, and then Boogie had injuries and all that stuff too. So it's just been a long time coming. Then we had that bubble year where everything was kind of weird.
Yeah, when was the last time we had Steph, KD, and LeBron all healthy on a good team for the playoffs? Like, it probably was 2018, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah, it's been
2018, yeah.
Yeah, because 2019, LeBron was out because of the groin injury. 2020, LeBron won it, but Steph and KD didn't go to the bubble. Then 2021, LeBron was out and KD looked good, but his team was bad. No, and then Steph was out that one too because they lost in the play-in tournament. Yeah, that's right. So literally that core 3 guys from the previous era, we haven't got to see them all play healthy on a good team at the same time. Now, both the Warriors and the Lakers have such a long road ahead of them because of the hole that they've dug. But I think both of those teams are still dangerous. So yeah, and then Jokic is going to have like a legitimate chance to shut everyone up. After everything that's been said about him over the course of the last couple of years. I feel like we're on the precipice of a Giannis revenge campaign type of thing. I feel like, dude, like Embiid and Harden last night, after a really, really, really bad first half, they came back and kind of punched Memphis back and got a win. They look like they're kind of ready for a run. So, yeah, it's going to be incredible, man. I can't wait.
Right. Yeah, and then the Memphis Grizzlies, just without Steven Adams, apparently just falling off the chart. So, Jason, there's a lot of stuff we got to get to, but I definitely want to start us off on the right foot. We've had, since the Timpf straw poll results came out for the last one before we get the final result at the end of the year, we had Jokic basically just clear and cut head favorite where he had 77 of 100 first place votes. And then I think we had Giannis with 11 first place votes, and then we had Embiid with 5. So there was this massive discrepancy that we saw when this came out. Now, the funny thing was, when the first one came out, I believe Jason Tatum was leading, but it was such a slim lead that everybody kind of predicted that there was going to be a shift. But basically from December to that last straw poll, we saw Tatum fall off. We saw Embiid rise from 10 all the way up to 3. And then we kind of saw Giannis, who was at 2. Just the efficiency wasn't there. Like, it was just kind of really murky basketball. The offense was falling apart. He had that game with the Atlanta Hawks where he scored like 9 points or whatever, like back-to-back games or something, even though he played good as a playmaker that game, had great rebounds, had like 20 rebounds. And then Jokic, from that point on in December, the Nuggets basically had the best record in basketball. Jokic took his triple-double numbers up to like 23, 12, and 12 over that run on some dumb efficiency. And then now we got Jokic at the very top, and he looks like the clear runaway favorite. But what happened was, it felt like, to me, Jason, you could tell me if I'm tripping, when that straw poll came out, I don't quite remember a time where I've seen as much pushback, and I would even say a little bit of just like babying that people were doing to Giannis. And not saying you, but just the overall public. But people were just like acting like Giannis is just like the most slighted superstar of this era. And I'm sitting here like, wait a minute. Giannis is the consensus best player in the NBA. Giannis had not started the year well, and really until about game, 40, didn't start peaking offensively. And again, like, Jrue Holiday played excellent this season. He's an all-star. Brook Lopez, I think, is one of the top 2 leading candidates for DPOY. Obviously, Bobby Portis went down. There's no Chris Middleton, but their roster is still stacked. And even if you don't want to say it's offensively stacked, it's defensively slanted. And when they had Javon Carter and Grayson Allen and Giannis, and I think it's Brook and Bobby, I think they had the number 1 defense in the NBA by leaps and bounds. They were just all over the place. But when this whole poll came out, it felt like people were just so aghast at the sheer volume of people that thought that Jokic was the best player in the NBA this season, that there feels like there was some real pushback that I don't even think was just a social media pushback, but even it feels like some of the voters might be swayed because of some of the pushback. Do you have any overall thoughts on that whole occurrence?
First of all, I don't think the voters will be swayed. I think Jokic is going to win it. There's a heavy analytical foundation in the MVP voter or the NBA award voting kind of community, and the advanced metrics are way in Jokic's favor. Now, for me personally, like, I would prefer it if that never came up in the discussion. I think I'm a basketball purist, and I think that it's blasphemy to pretend like you can simplify the game of basketball down to one number. That said, like, I think the pushback is the same type of pushback you see at every single level of basketball at every age group, where it's like, we like what we had. And so when something new comes onto the scene and threatens that, we all get super defensive. That's normal. So like, it to me, it's like the same foundational concept of like people from the 1980s hating modern basketball, right. Whereas like guys like us, from our age group, like we're a little bit more tuned to the 10, 15 years ago group of guys, right? Like I'm super nostalgic about LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony and Tracy McGrady and Allen Iverson and Kobe Bryant and all these different guys. We have our favorites. And so I think that's where the pushback comes from. Now, for me with Jokic, like my pushback is not like Jokic isn't good or Jokic isn't deserving of his credit. My thing is I just don't see the separation that everyone else is seeing. So like to me, if the season ended today, I would say it's a toss-up between Giannis and Nikola Jokic, and then I'd have Embiid one level below that. And the way that I look at it is, first of all, with Giannis, his specifically that lack of offensive talent was always going to hurt his efficiency because he's been put in a predicament where he's had to change his shot diet away from what he usually likes to do because of the lack of spot-up talent on the roster. And you've seen in recent months, as Joe Ingles has come available, as Chris Middleton has rejoined the rotation, his efficiency skyrocketed. Now, I think Nikola Jokic is having one of the very best offensive seasons I've ever seen. And it goes so much further than the scoring, because I know so many Jokic fans are like, hey, 70% true shooting on this high scoring volume. This is incredible. That's not even scratching the surface of it for me. To me, his advantage creation is unlike anything I've seen in recent NBA history. The Nuggets get fantastic shots every single time down the floor. It's wild, his ability to warp defenses and put you in a predicament with your defensive rotations to leave shooters open. And the one time that you switch off of him, he's just quick catching in the lane and turning over his left shoulder and making a little hook shot. Like, his offensive season has been incredible. I think Giannis's defensive season has been just as incredible. Because the way I look at it, when everything went down for them with offensive talent, and they were in this predicament where the league is stacked and they're facing these good teams every single night and they're loading up on Giannis, he had to find ways to win games in other ways. And there have been games. There was a game I watched a couple weeks ago where, like, he just straight up was like, fine, I'm going to guard Kawhi Leonard now, and he's not going to score down the stretch. And time again, Kawhi is trying to take these impossible fadeaways over Giannis, and he's not even close, including his last fadeaway over Giannis, which came like 2 feet short of the rim. And like, that is, to me, is the defensive version of what Jokic has done this year. Now, there's been up and downs throughout it all, right? Like, earlier in the season, the Nuggets weren't super good. As of late, the Bucks are playing better basketball. But bottom line, to me, I don't see the separation. And when you look at that straw poll, they're demonstrating it as though it's this clear-cut race. And to me, it's like, hey, man, can we watch the last 25 games and see who ends up higher in the standings and whether or not one of these guys tails off? Because I just don't see that separation. So let me ask you this. Can you make the case for me as to why there is a gap between Jokic and the rest of the field?
Well, you know what's funny is I think, and again, it's almost as if, like, when the straw poll came out, I think a lot of people saw like a big 77 number, and it was like, how is there that much of a gap, 77 to 11? But for me, it feels as if there's 77 individual people who have believed that Jokic has been better than Giannis. But I think a lot of that comes to, it might be just for them, just a slim margin, but on the paper, when the voting came out, it made it seem like there's this chasm that existed between the two. But Jason, I also want you to understand, I said a year and a half ago, when it was not popular, the two best players in the NBA are Jokic and Giannis. And personally, I do not think that anybody else is in their category as of right now, given health, given production, given team impact, given floor raising. I think those are the two best floor raisers in the NBA. And I think since LeBron has kind of curtailed from GOAT to all NBA player, basically, which is just a nuts, like 38 years old, that's the slide. And so I don't think that it's a chasm as much as it is just overall value this season. And I think it does go to that Jokic, I think, has, and let me ask you this question too, before I go further. When you look at their overall rosters, and coaching included, do you think that Jokic has a roster advantage with his construct and his team over what Giannis has with his roster?
I do think so in this season from the standpoint of health.
Sure.
But I think you laid it out really well in your first rant, where you basically said, like, you know, like, Denver's offensive talent is off the charts. And like, as I go down, I did this whole breakdown last night on Michael Porter Jr. and the dynamic of having him as such. Did you know that Michael Porter Jr. is the very best spot up player in the league who's attempted at least 200 spot up possessions? He's averaging 1.31 points per possession. It's outrageous. It's almost a point and a half. It's better than everybody else in the entire league. And there's this dynamic with like Jokic and his ability to fire cross-court passes, and Michael Porter Jr. in the weak side corner having such a high and quick release that makes them so like, every NBA defense helps out of the weak side corner, and you just can't do that against Denver because they're going to kill you every single time. That's just one guy. I think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is one of the best role player two guards in the NBA. I've said that since he was with the Lakers. One of the best closeout attackers in the NBA, shooting lights out from three this year. He's one of the best transition guards in the NBA. His ability to run the floor and extend out off of one leg and finish at the rim. He can sprint to the corner for three-point shots. Obviously, Jamal Murray, we don't even have to get into it. That dude is still working his way back from injury and is one of the best skill guards that we have in the league. And then Aaron Gordon kind of defaulting into that offensive center position where he's kind of playing out of the dunker spot as a cutter. They have a ton of offensive talent. And then you laid it out perfectly. The Bucks, like Brook Lopez is a perennial defensive player of the year candidate at the center position. Drew Holiday is literally one of the most versatile guard defenders to ever play in the NBA. Javon Carter is an excellent defensive guard. Giannis is the best defensive player in the league. Like they have the defensive version of that. Now, I just think that as we look at that from a talent perspective, it's easy to get kind of gravitated toward the the Nuggets, so I don't want to pretend like they're so much more talented than Milwaukee, but I do think that they've had a slight advantage when you account for games played from their core players. Because even Drew Holiday, who's been great, has been in and out of the lineup a little bit.
But I think Drew Holiday though has played more games than Jamal Murray this year. So
really?
So that's like sometimes when I would hear like people bring up the injury factor. Michael Porter missed 13 straight games with a heel injury. Jamal Murray has played less games than Drew, and I think Bruce Brown, I think he started maybe 20 or so games or something this year. And then obviously AG's been out the last 7 games. So even with that, Jokic is taking Blacko, Chanchar, Bruce Brown, KCP, Christian Brown, and all these players, and it doesn't matter. They're still like the greatest offense of all time when he's on the court. I think they have like a 126 offensive rating or something like that when he's been on the court this year. So for me, I think Jokic is playing more games than Giannis again. They are 39-13 when Jokic played this year. That's a 75% win percentage. That's a 62 win pace with no other All-Star on the roster. And again, I've definitely griped about that. I don't think that Jaren Jackson Jr. should have been over Aaron Gordon because of the game play stuff. I think just with the game played everything, I think he should have been there. I thought Jamal, if he played long enough, played more, I think he could have an argument over maybe like De'Aaron Fox or something like that. But again, no All-Star on the roster. It's him. And it's what the NBA is communicating is good players, role players. But for me, I think the fact that Giannis has Brook Lopez and Drew helping to anchor that defense is what makes them so viable, and in the playoffs especially. Because when you get in a playoff setting with them, you can't attack the rim at a highly efficient level unless you have a big that can pull Brook out of the paint. And then you can get Giannis on an island, and you can get him out of that weak side helper position. But if you're going to try to get past Drew, and then somehow try to get past Brook, and then you got Giannis helping backside, so you can't just throw the ball to the corner, you're cooked. So for me, that's what their value is that all 3 of them are able to work so seamlessly. And then you put Chris Middleton and Jay Crowder and Joe Ingles and Grayson Allen and Pat Connaughton. You ain't beating that team unless you're able to shoot the ball. Like, I think that Milwaukee Bucks roster is so good. And I'm not going to lie to you.
Chris Middleton has missed most of the season, for the record.
Right. Yeah, he has.
And he's been on a minutes restriction and coming off the bench a lot and some stuff there. But I do you are making a good case for the fact that the Bucks are at least as talented. But for the record, they're right next to each other in the standings. And Giannis has done a really nice job floating that team.
To be fair, though, again, Giannis has also missed games, and he's going to miss more games with his wrist injury, and they're still able to stay afloat at a better degree. I think the Nuggets are 3-5 without Jokic, 3 of those games because of COVID. I think the 76ers are 8-4 without Embiid, and then I think the Bucks, I think they have a winning record as well, if I haven't forgotten.
I think they are too, yeah. And if Giannis misses a few more games, I'm with you. And I said this in my show with Carson on Wednesday this week. If Giannis misses 3-4 more games with a wrist injury, it's over because I don't think Embiid can get there. I think Jokic has already played 5 more games than Giannis, or 6 after last night. So yeah, if he misses any more, it's I agree with you. But and for the record, and I want to say this a million times over, like this is not an anti-Jokic take. I love Jokic. Literally, I'm such a huge believer in what he does offensively, and if he wins the MVP and he's deserving, I'm going to be singing his praises. It's just, I'm a huge believer in what Giannis does, and I think his case has been just as good to this point.
Well, again, Jason, I want to say this too for people that are going to hear this. I have said, and I think you tell me if I'm tripping, Giannis, Jokic, and Luka, I think those are the 3 LeBrons, Durant, Currys of this generation. I think those are the era
absolutely
players. Do you think so?
Yeah, and I think I think Joel Embiid would have a bone to pick with that. But I think that's what's so cool about this next era of basketball is like, I think, like, man, dude, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be like a first team, second team All NBA guy for the next 7-8 years. Like that's just going to happen. Like the league is so unbelievably stacked now. It's not even funny.
Right. So, and again, I hear you about the Embiid thing and Harden and all that stuff, but until maybe 12 games ago, I thought Embiid was having a better season than Giannis was. And I was getting pushed back from that because Embiid was averaging, 33, 10, and 4, and he has a 64% true shooting, and he's been anchoring a top 5 defense throughout the entire year. That's not to say he's a better player than Giannis, but I think given Giannis' struggles, I don't think there was a clear argument defensively for Giannis over Embiid in terms of like this gap. I think that he's a better defender, but I think
perimeter versatility would be the thing with Giannis. Like Embiid's not switching out onto Kawhi and shutting him down to end a game. You know what I mean?
Right. And then I think Embiid argued having a better offensive season as well, but then Giannis went on that crazy 37, 13, and 6 run.
Dude, if he wants to drop his shoulder for a couple of weeks, it's like it's an easy 40 points a game. Like it's crazy that his ceiling is like always there when he needs it, and it's just I am a man amongst boys, literally.
Right.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, so I think that's what makes his playoff versatility so astounding. Is just that I rewatched the Sun series recently, and I was just sitting there watching, even just like Game 5, and just Giannis just absolutely taking Ayton to task whenever he wanted to. And, when Giannis starts hitting those little like pop shots or those little mid-range shots, it's over. Like, you're cooked.
Oh, his free throw came around in that series too, remember?
Yeah, I think he made 17 free throws in the last game or something like that. So, and here's the thing. This is our next segment, playoff players. Because last year, you had a little ranking that you did where you were ranking your playoff players, in terms of viability. And I think you had Jokic at like 7, because of, I think, the wing versatility and wing preferences and all that. I think you had Embiid at like 8. I want to make the argument to you that I think, especially given this year with this roster, last year Jokic gave you 31, 13, and 6 on 63% true shooting. And then the last 3 games were 35, 15, and 6 on 73 versus the number 1 defense in the playoffs. And he didn't have anyone around him that was playing up to par last year. Do you think this version of Jokic with this team, do you think that is a player that will be able to sneak into your top 3 or 5 playoff players that you would want going into this playoffs?
So I have him top 5. I want to preface this because you sent me this as a topic, and I thought about it a little bit this morning.
Right.
Everybody has their different way that they see the game. So like, this is just the way that I see the game. It's not right. It's just the way that I see the game. I have always had a preference toward perimeter of perimeter versatility on both ends of the floor. Okay. Also, I'm a huge believer in applying the appropriate respect to how difficult it is to win an NBA championship. So the 4 guys that I would have above Jokic, I have in order. I'd go Giannis, then KD, then Steph, then LeBron, than Jokic right now. Now, again, this is what I'm looking at here. All 4 of those guys above Jokic have won titles.
Right.
I think that's 11 combined NBA championships. But it goes deeper than that. Giannis has had a 2-0 lead on the Toronto Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals in a great position to move on and blew it and didn't play well. He's experienced that heartache. Kevin Durant has literally been up 3-1 on the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals and didn't get it done. Steph Curry lost in 2016 after being up 3-1 in the finals, lost again in 2019 in 6 games. Like, LeBron James obviously has had a mountain of heartbreak. He's lost in the finals 6 times. Like, I apply so much respect to just how difficult it is to win 16 NBA playoff games. And so, to be clear, when Jokic has done it, dude, you're going to be like, if we fast forward 5 years from now and he's got 2 titles, I'm going to be his biggest proponent. Right. Like, I'm going to be the dude who's like, hey, Jokic has done this. We have to trust him, But to this point, the closest he's gotten is 7 wins away against the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals in the bubble. And I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh, Jokic can't play in the playoffs. I think Jokic is a great playoff player. I think his defensive limitations become problematic there, but I also think his offensive shot creation actually goes up a level in the playoffs. We've just seen that time and time again. So I'm a huge fan of Jokic, but you're not going to get me to pick him over guys that have already done it. And I guess the one guy that I'm sure Nuggets fans would be like, what the hell, is LeBron. And all I would say is, with exception of this last stretch here when he's been nursing the foot injury, look at how good he was over the previous 2 months when Anthony Davis was out and that team had no offensive skill around him, and the Russell Westbrook clunky fit and all of the issues in late game situations when everyone just loaded up on him. And he still was winning damn near every single one of his shifts. And the on-off numbers were ridiculous because he still, when push comes to shove, when he puts his foot down, I will not take him for a whole regular season over Jokic. I think Jokic is, like you call it, floor raising. I 100% agree. Jokic's ability night in and night out for 82 games to elevate a team goes beyond what LeBron is physically capable of at this point. But if I need 16 wins and I'm in the playoffs and all teams are equal, I still have LeBron in that top tier guys that I would trust to lead that type of team. And so, again, I have Jokic as the next guy at 5th. But for me personally, I will never vault him above any of those guys unless they physically break down and disappear from the league or until Jokic wins an NBA championship. That's just my point of personal preference. Yeah. I absolutely think Jokic can win it this year. I actually think, gun to my head, I think I'd pick Denver to win the West right now. So, I'm very confident in what Jokic can do, but I'm going to wait to heap the praise on him until he's got the Larry O.B. in his hands. Because, dude, I think the Larry O.B. is sacred, man. I think it's sacred, and I think it deserves a certain amount of respect.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, honestly. If you're going by who's done it, still at their peaks, LeBron's not at his peak, but relative to other peaks, he's at his peak. And I think if you add all that together, that makes sense. I think that's a fair concession for Giannis, Steph, LeBron. But I think the only one, this actually would be a good transition into
Let's hear it.
Conversation. Jason, I don't understand. Just Kevin Durant has this hold on people, and I think he's great. He's a top 12 player from all time. So this is not to say he isn't. Kevin Durant has not yet, at any time in his career, been able to function as the best player on his team and win a championship since he's been drafted in 2007. Now, he got close in 2012, and I think they were the favorites going into that series versus the Miami Heat. They lost that series 4-2. You get 2015-16, you're up 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors. Game 6, awful. Game 7, awful. They lose that series. Kevin Durant then transfers to Hogwarts and basically teams up. He teams up with Harry Potter, Hermione, and Ron, and then basically he's like, "All right, bet." And then he wins Finals MVP, and everybody's like, "Well, how did you stop that team?" Well, you can't. There's nothing you can do about that. So, by the way, that's just, if you haven't seen the Hogwarts game came out, and it's like, I'm a gamer, so that
I've heard it's great, man.
It's been excellent. So Kevin Durant joins this team, wins Finals MVP. I think Steph Curry is the most important and best player on that roster over that course of that time. They obviously gets hurt in 18-19, not his fault. They would have won then. 19-20 sits out. 2020, I mean, you want to talk about like incredible. 47, 18, and like 10 or whatever else it was.
You mean 2021?
Yeah, 2021 in the 21 playoffs. Obviously Harden, Kyrie out there, but he goes 0-6 in overtime. It happened. He got tired. He got gassed. I think the same thing happened to Giannis last year versus the Celtics when he had 25, 12, and 9. Didn't have it.
Yeah, Game 7, he was bad offensively. Yeah.
Right. Couldn't make a layup. Like, he was smoking layups. That means his legs weren't there. So my thing with Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant gets this almost like this annulment that because he's done it next to these great players, it's like, well, he can do it. And I would even say Kawhi Leonard has reached heights in terms of playoff performance that Kevin Durant hasn't yet reached because he's been able to do it as the 1A alpha. And so I think even to have Kevin Durant at like 2 on that list, when for me it's just like, wow, like Kevin Durant's in a situation where he's with Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul with Monty Williams. Like, that is a bona fide great team with a great culture, with a great system in place that he's going to walk in and be a gunner. And he's going to get all the credit for it when I do think he deserves it. But it's almost as if, like, I haven't yet seen KD be that player that people were expecting him to be when they were comparing him to LeBron, or even expecting him to be when they compared him to Steph. This doesn't mean that he's not that, like, echelon of player, but it's just, it doesn't feel like he has done it at that same level as those guys. Even Giannis, like Giannis's run in 2021, it doesn't feel like he's done that yet.
So I'm gonna stick up for KD a little bit here, and I do agree with the general premise of your point because, like, for instance, I think there's a lot of people out there who have KD over Steph all time, and I do not. Like, to me, what Steph did last year is a greater accomplishment than anything Kevin Durant's done in the league, and I thought he deserved Finals MVP in 2015 too. And he was at least as good as KD on the 2017-2018 Warriors. So like I have KD kind of like behind LeBron and Steph by a decent margin. However, I want to cut him a couple of bits of slack because like we're evaluating basketball players,
right,
not necessarily basketball teams, and we're also evaluating basketball players, not necessarily their off-court decision making. So I want to cut him slack on two fronts. First of all, he had to play with Russell Westbrook for a long time. And as bad as he was in 2016, down the stretch, and I think he was like 10 for 31 in game 6 and then like 10 for 30 in game 7 or something like that. No, I think he was actually pretty good in game 7, but he was bad in game 5 and game 6,
right,
if I remember correctly. But in that game 6, they still should have won that series, even with as bad as KD played. Russell Westbrook was nightmarishly bad in that fourth quarter and had several pivotal turnovers and mistakes down the stretch of the game. In a game, like there's like 3 absolute gut-punching mistakes that Russ made in the final minutes of that game 6, the Klay Thompson game. So like part of me in retrospect looks back and goes like, it's difficult to win in the playoffs with Russell Westbrook, especially at that phase of his career where he was so confident in his abilities that he had no filter and he was just throwing shots up, right? After that, he decided to pair with Kyrie Irving, and that was a mistake, right? I think we can all agree on that. Just because of the fact that Kyrie more often than not kind of left him hanging out to dry. So I'm not going to hold them accountable for that off the court. As a basketball player, do we think Kevin Durant is as good at basketball on both ends of the floor as some of the guys we've mentioned? I do. And I think we've seen it on big stages. So for instance, game 4 against the Cavs, or actually, I think it actually was game 3. Yeah, it was game 3 against the Cavs.
Pull up in Cleveland.
It will. And but game 3 again in 2018 was like one of the best games I've ever seen a basketball player play. I think he had like 45. He had like a 45-point triple-double. It was either game 3 or game 4 in the 2018 finals. I can't remember. And like LeBron threw a great punch in that game. The Cavs defended it at a high level. And Kevin Durant just was like, I'm playing at such a high level, there's nothing you can do about it. And so all I'm saying, that was the one where he hit the super deep 3, like the one that was like 30 feet. So like I agree that there's kind of a gap between him and some of the guys ahead of him. I think his all-time resume surpasses Giannis just because he's been in the league for longer. Yeah. But like to me, gun to my head, if it's the Phoenix Suns versus the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals and KD's on the other team, I think you would probably be just as scared of him as you would of Steph or of Giannis, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so here's the funny thing is, so with KD, here, this is what I'll say, because I've said this before. I think playmaking for me is the most important thing in basketball. I think
me too, man.
If you're able to play making in the league, that's what makes Bron. Like, so again, this is why you and I can always connect on Bron. I would watch Bron 2014-15 have his left shoulder on the post. It would be 5 Warriors with a step in the paint, and he would just like gut a pass across the court to J.R. Smith, and it's just like they're so afraid of him with no Kyrie and no Kevin Love on the court. And it's him, and it's Timothy Mozgov, and he's still bending everything on the court. So for me, like I saw that in Michael, I saw it in Bron, and it showed me that even over players like Kobe Bryant, that if you're able to elevate your team with playmaking, it just takes you to a different place. So for me, Kevin Durant, between Giannis, Steph, Bron, and Jokic, is the worst playmaker of all 5 of those players. And I would even say, go ahead. Do you think he's better than Giannis?
I think KD's made a lot of strides as a playmaker in recent years. And so Kevin Durant, for instance, has been the best pick and roll ball handler in the NBA this year. And a huge part of that is he's doing what we've always given Steph credit for, which is draw the blitz on the pick and roll and make the right read over the top. I do think he had a really bad playmaking series against Boston last year. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of legitimate criticism there. As you look back over the tape, he missed a lot of open guys. But generally speaking, over the last 5 years or so of his career, I do think he's made strides as a playmaker. But sure. I would agree with you, though, that compared to the other guys we mentioned, he's definitely the worst at that.
Which is still elite. So,
yeah, but he's still good. But he's still good. Yeah.
Right. It's just, even Giannis has improved so much just in terms of
Giannis is a better playmaker than KD right now, I think.
Right. So I think that's what I mean. It's just like if there's a playmaking gap, and even if you want to say there's a defensive value there, I think for me, his defensive growth this year is connected more to Nick Claxton than it is him as an individual defender. But that's just me. So him next to DeAndre Ayton, it's not going to be as valuable because DeAndre Ayton's more of a traditional paint protector. And
Ayton's not nearly the defensive player that Claxton is. It's not close.
Right. So I do feel like they're going to struggle a little bit on that end just because if like a lot of Kevin Durant fans are going to be watching the playoffs very hard, and they're going to be looking at DeAndre Ayton like, why aren't you doing what Nick Claxton does? And, it's just like, well, that's just not what he does. And he doesn't even have the same motor. So I don't know if his value defensively is going to be enough for me to say he's a worse offensive player than Steph. He's a worse offensive player than Jokic for sure. He's probably a worse offensive player than Giannis. Well, maybe they're the same tier this year.
I'd probably take KD by a hair over Giannis offensively, but I think Giannis is miles better than KD defensively.
Right. So for me, that's kind of where I have it. And again, LeBron, 38 years old, you get LeBron in the series, he's probably going to wax you, So like I said last year, I think that if LeBron was on that Nets team, you think LeBron at 37 is not going to get 2 games off of these dudes? No.
Especially since the way Boston was defending, there were openings. But KD and Kyrie went down as pull-up jump shooters, and they missed their shots. And that's kind of the unfortunate reality. That's, we talked about this a lot with the Embiid Jokic battle, the one that Embiid hit all those shots at the end. Right. And like everyone was like, oh, this is the crowning achievement for Embiid. He's better than Jokic. He just proved it. And I said after that game, I was like, Embiid whooped his ass that day. Like, there's no way around it. Like, you just got to tip the cap. Like, today, Embiid whooped Jokic's ass. But there's a version of that game where through 3.5 quarters, Jokic looked like the better player. And there's a version of that game where Embiid doesn't get hot and knock down all those shots. Then Denver wins, and there's a totally different narrative. And in a 7-game series, it's really hard to knock down tough, contested pull-up jumpers time and time again. And over the course of a series, even defensively, Jokic would pick up on the little cues of the way that Embiid tips off his hesitation pull-up or step back 3 or something like that. This is why I think guys like us gravitate towards playmaking. I think that as long as you can punish teams for leaving you on an island, which LeBron and Jokic always have been able to do. It's like, oh, you want me to be a scorer? Fine. Here's 40. Enjoy it. You know what I mean? But like as far as like the specifically playmaking goes, I think it's more consistent. In a 7-game series, I think a playmaker that can get you great shots for your team gives you a better chance to win than like, oh, let's hope KD doesn't get hot 4 times out of 7 and scores 47. You know what I mean? Like that's just, I think that's why I've always gravitated towards that type of player.
So with that, and now as you're evaluating the Suns team with this iteration of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, who looked like he was a top 15 player the first 30 games of the year when he was healthy, then obviously you got Ayton, who's still a very good center. What are your expectations for this team with Kevin Durant coming in as a 36-7 dude on 67% true shooting? How do you feel like they're going to fit? And do you think there's a feasible window for them to go over the next 23 games, get the cohesiveness, get the connectivity, and be able to make a run to the finals out of the West?
I do. I think they're going to figure out the offensive end immediately. I think people underrate 2 things when they're looking at, how much time do they have to figure this out? Basketball IQ and natural complementary skill sets. If you have basketball IQ and naturally complementary skill sets, you'll be fine. The Lakers are incorporating a boatload of new players, but they brought in smart guards that fit with their skill set really well off of LeBron and AD. And LeBron and AD are 2 of the easiest players in the league to play with because they can just devote their energy towards dirty work. Anthony Davis took 5 shots last night. And was the best player on the floor in a game against the Warriors. Like literally that's the advantage of having basketball fit and basketball IQ. They are not like, this is a pick and roll team that already is accustomed to playing a certain way. And they've added the best pick and roll ball handler in the NBA. Already the Suns are used to slotting in different ways. Like Booker can slide into that off ball Mikal Bridges role. He's done it from time to time this season. He can also be the primary ball handler. They can, have Chris Paul run the action. They can even just put KD as the primary ball handler running their stuff. So I think they're going to figure out the offensive end right away. The defensive end is where everything comes down for them because, like you said, Ayton is nowhere near the rim protector that Nick Claxton is and really struggles with motor. And in the backcourt, Devin Booker has worked really hard to become a good defender, like a decent above average defender. Chris Paul in his prime was a great defensive guard. Right now, I think he's more average to below average because he just struggles physically. And then Kevin Durant, his value as a help defender and rim protector does not extend out to the perimeter. Kevin Durant's never been like a great on-ball perimeter defender. He's just too thin and it's easy to get around him, right? So really, it comes down to two things. Who can they get to be their primary point of attack defender? I think Josh Okogie is my favorite candidate right now because like he can guard guards pretty damn well. And then secondly, like you're right, Kevin Durant is going to have to even go up another level as a rim protector because he's not going to have Claxton back there. And he's going to have to clean up a lot of messes. Because I think of all of the serious playoff teams this year, I think Phoenix has the worst perimeter defensive core. So like they're going to be chasing their tails off in rotation nonstop. It might not matter if they score the ball super, super well, but yeah, like I don't think they have that like clear-cut championship favorite type of roster that I think they'll have next year after they make a couple of key veteran minimum signings and a mid-level exception on the margins to round things out. I think next year they'll be terrifying. But within this season, they have a glaring defensive flaw both at the rim and on the perimeter, which is scary.
Listen to these names. 37-year-old Chris Paul, Devin Booker off of a hurt hamstring, basically. You got Landry Shamet, Wilson, and Cameron Payne as your primary guard defenders. And then if you want to slot Josh Okogie and Torrey Craig in there, well, I think there are some limitations for them defensively. But those are your 7 players that are supposed to be guarding on the perimeter. And when you're playing against, in the West, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, Damian Lillard, if just in a play-in situation. And then on top of that, you're going to have to deal with now D'Angelo Russell and, Malik Beasley and LeBron in them. And then you got obviously Jamal Murray. You got Bruce Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Again, I think it comes down very similar to you. Shot making, late game execution. Can you get viable stops at the end of a half? Can you get viable stops at the end of the fourth? And can your late game execution, your pick and roll, your rotation, can they be tight enough that you get into a situation, even if it's a 115 to 112 game, where you're able to get enough stops in key places to be able to beat these teams 4 times? That's probably the thing that I'm not as confident in, but I do think there should be championship level expectations on them because of the sheer volume of talent that they have, if that makes sense.
I agree to a certain extent. Like I wouldn't call it like a catastrophic failure if they lost. Like I wouldn't call it a black mark. Like it's not 2011 LeBron if they don't get it done. But anytime you lose and you've got that kind of talent, there's a certain level of concern. Like for the record, I thought KD took a little bit of a hit last year with what happened against the Celtics. Like that was a disappointing performance. No way around it, right? I do think specifically like where continuity becomes a big advantage is on the defensive end. So I'll give you an example. Denver does not have good defensive personnel in the aggregate compared to the better defenses around the league, right? Like they don't have Drew Holiday and Brook Lopez and Giannis and Javon Carter. No, but what they do have is they've got a couple of really good defensive players. Like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a very good defensive player and Aaron Gordon is a very good defensive player. And their limited defensive players, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Nikola Jokic, are committed to those details. And what you've seen is like you can make up for some personnel issues with scheming and practice and like being on a string. Like when your rotations are on a string, which is like almost instinct that you build by establishing those habits over an entire regular season, you can actually become a good defensive team. Like the Nuggets have been a good defensive team now for the last half of the season, like a legitimate top 10 defense for a significant chunk of games, despite not having top 10 defensive personnel. That is by commitment, effort, focus, details, chemistry, continuity on the defensive end. That's where Phoenix is at a disadvantage because I do think that Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Josh Okogie, Torrey Craig, whoever it is, Kevin Durant and DeAndre Ayton can defend at a high enough level to win an NBA championship. Will they be able to figure that out in 20 games? That's the big question. And I don't know if they can get their rotations sharp enough and their scheme sharp enough in that short period of time. This is where Denver's been paying their dues. Denver has been literally investing in this regular season to try to be able to because they don't need to be the best defense in the world, but if they can reach, there's a level somewhere, there's a line somewhere where if Denver can get to that line defensively, their offense is so damn good, they're going to win. And so they're investing in that every single day to get to that level, and I just don't know if Phoenix has enough time to do that.
Right. Yeah, and I like that analysis because I think sometimes people, when they talk about basketball, and it's no fault, I think that I blame the larger media just because of how we have taught people about basketball. People hear Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Durant, and Ayton, and they're like, oh, well, talent, individual player basis, that should be enough. And again, I'm also going to blame Rob Pelinka. I think Rob Pelinka is one of those dudes. Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis. Individual talent, that's enough. But you know better than most that, okay, losing KCP, losing Alex Caruso, losing Kyle Kuzma, next to LeBron, next to AD, with Rajon Rondo, with JaVale McGee, with Dwight Howard, you just took away your entire championship core that trusted stuff. So if you're in a situation where you don't have players that trust the scheme, trust the personnel, and know each other well, you are always at a disadvantage versus a connected team. This is why, for me, the Bucks and the Celtics, I think the Bucks probably still have the edge over the Celtics because I just think they have the best play. But man, that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's going to be a dogfight trying to stop them with Giannis and Chris and Drew and Joe Ingles, and you're having to deal with that defense because they put in, as you said, years of continuity. You know, Jason, if you in a relationship, if you got somebody you've been with for 10 years, hey, we are grinding in the pavement every single day. So like,
hell yeah, man,
how to make a house work. But when you just get somebody brand new, hey, you know, we a celebrity, I'm a celebrity, let's just get together and make it work. That's not how relationships are built. You know, you need time, you need equity. So, you know, for me, I think that the thing that might separate Denver from everybody else is the fact that they have been able to have continuity. They've been able to be connected, but there's an identity. They know who they are, and they trust their execution maybe more than anyone else might.
Yeah, and again, like there's you laid it out good, but essentially on defense, there's so much that needs to happen instantaneously. Like we've even seen this last night with Denver, Cleveland. When a rotation is a half second too slow against Michael Porter Jr., that's the difference between 3 points and not, you know? Right. And that rotation being there on time has to be done time and time again with your backline communicator, whether, you know, Jared Allen or whoever it is, has to be calling out the coverages so that guys get ahead of where they're supposed to be, and so that everyone rotates to the right guy when the time comes. Like that sort of thing almost becomes instinctual. And you're right, you have to invest in that over time, and that's just going to be the thing that I think makes it difficult. But here's the reality: like they do have a ton of talent. And if they can get into enough close games, I do think they're going to get great shots on both ends of the floor. So I think we'd be foolish to look over them. But everything is about like the safest bet, right? Like now, if you and I are doing a show in July and Phoenix has the trophy, we're not going to be shocked. Right. But in terms of the safe bet, who's the safest bet? To me, it's who's got, you know, arguably the best player in the Western Conference, Denver. Okay. Who on a night in, night out basis throughout the regular season has demonstrated a commitment to the details of winning basketball in the Western Conference? Well, that's Denver. Okay. Who's the team that has the most offensive skill in the Western Conference? Oh, well, that's Denver. Okay. Over the last 40 games or so, who's been the best defense in the Western Conference? Well, it's probably like, you know, Memphis, or, you know, the Clippers have been really good defensively, but you know, who's right up there with them? Denver. So if I'm trying to make a bet, and I've got to pick one of these teams to get out of this conference, I think the Lakers can do it. I think the Warriors can do it. I think the Clippers can do it. I think the Suns can do it. I think that's it. But I think Denver's the safest bet. And so when the time comes, unless the Lakers rip off like a 20-2 stretch here, I'm probably going to be picking Denver to win the conference. It's just smart. That would be just us paying attention to what we're seeing on our TV screens.
Right. Yeah, well, I can tell you right now, the Lakers aren't going 20-2, so they're going to be OKC first. But transitioning to the
They
Lakers,
might. There's a chance.
how did you feel? Like, yesterday LeBron had 13 points, I think, or something like that. The Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, D'Angelo Russell, obviously, the Dante DiVincenzo, just a weird play, like out of bounds, accidentally rolled his ankle. Anthony Davis has reverted the clock and turned into 2012 Anthony Davis, when he was basically the best defensive player to come into the draft, in several years. How do you feel this new Lakers team is looking together so far?
It's interesting. I'm not worried about LeBron at all. He's a rhythm player. Like LeBron, even when he was terrible to start this season by his standards, I said on my show, I'm like, wait till he gets healthy and give him 15 games. And I was like, by the time that 15 games, and then literally that's what happened. He came back from his groin injury. He actually was able to stay on the court for a while, and he played every bit as good as the best players in the league over the next 2 months until he broke the scoring record. Anthony Davis, to me, there's like a physicality to him that you can tell when he's right. And last night, albeit he only took 5 shots, last night was the first time since he returned from his foot injury where he looked like that level of physical athlete. Like that play where he blocked Jordan Poole on the reverse layup on the other side of the rim, like that's an obnoxiously good defensive play. And there was a couple of offensive rebound putbacks that he had where he went over the top of people.
He dunked over Troy Brown Jr.
Yeah, like that to me is like, oh, like he trusts his foot now, which he didn't for the previous 10 games or so. Now, I've always been a huge believer in the LeBron Anthony Davis core, but they need complementary role players. I've been preaching this for 2 years. We don't need to get into it. You actually broke it down really well a minute ago, talking about the Russell Westbrook trade. But it really is this simple to me. They addressed their 2 biggest needs. They needed backcourt offensive skill, and they needed perimeter size that could take defensive responsibilities that LeBron James and Anthony Davis don't want to do, right? Jared Vanderbilt they've weaponized him basically as their primary wing defender since he came, and he's done a great job in almost every single assignment that he's done, including a great job on Brandon Ingram the other night. Last night, D'Angelo Russell goes out with an ankle sprain, and Malik Beasley basically slots into his spot as the skill guard and does an amazing job. And the way I look at it now, they've got LeBron and Anthony Davis completely reinvigorated and bought back in defensively. They've been the 3rd best defense in the league since their trade pieces started playing 4 games ago, albeit very small sample size. Right. They've got the offensive skill that fits. All the players have been slotted properly. Like Troy Brown Jr., if he's your starting 3, that's a problem. Now he's coming off the bench. Kind of makes a lot more sense now. You see what I'm saying? Like they've got Mo Bamba as like a backup big that they can actually run a drop coverage with instead of Thomas Bryant, who was a sieve on the defensive end. So like they've got all those pieces there. I know that the Lakers are good now. Are they great? I don't know. We're going to find out. They've got a lot of games. Like they got to go on the road to Dallas on Sunday. If they roll up into Dallas and they beat the crap out of Kyrie and Luka, I mean, at a certain point, we're going to have to be like, wow, they look pretty damn good, but they've got a lot of work to do. And most importantly, because of the situation they're in the standings, from right now, February 24th to June 18th, I think is the last day of the NBA Finals, they would have to stay at this level for almost 4 months. And we're talking about a 38-year-old and a center that can't play 15 games in a row without getting hurt. So gun to my head, if you ask me what's going to happen, I think they're going to break down physically and something bad's going to happen. But if they do stay healthy, I think you'd be foolish to write them off. Where are you at with the Lakers, man? I'm curious.
I predicted before the season that they're going to be a 9th or 10th seed. So far, they disappointed my expectations. They've been sitting at 13. I had them right where the Blazers would be, in a play-in. I just think when just the rosters, everything around it, Malik Beasley was in Denver, very familiar with his game. Jared Vanderbilt was in Denver, very familiar with their games. Malik is a abysmal defender. Like he's going to be caught in some situations where you're just going to be looking at him and just not going to understand the decision making. Jared is a great defender, great offensive rebounder, his hustle, all that stuff. I think he's going to be a great player next to Anthony Davis. I just think for me, I watched D'Angelo Russell for years too. I think they're going to get cooked on the perimeter in certain matchups. That's going to be really difficult for them to contain. I think the shot making from some of these other teams is going to be outpace them. I like Austin Reeves. I think he's a good player. He's a good defender, good shooter. he has a lot more on-ball skill than I think people give him credit for. I think people might see a little too much Alex Caruso maybe when he was there, where didn't really see him dribble a lot. I think the Lakers can be good. I think they can still make the playoffs. I just don't know if I can make the assumption that LeBron at 38 years old is going to be able to hold up the way he needs to, which is not. It shouldn't be his responsibility at this age, just to be honest with you. Anthony Davis has not shown that he can play significant minutes at a high level for the last 3 years, longer than 8 or 10 games at a time. So, and again, if they make it to 6, which maybe they do, then you're going to be looking at possibly playing the Clippers in the first round. And I think the Clippers are just going to win that series. I just think they're just a better basketball team. But then if they make it to 7, can they beat Memphis? If you're a Lakers fan, I've heard plenty of Lakers fans thinking they can beat Denver because they're like 1-2 they're 2-1 versus Denver with LeBron. So for them, that's like a thing. I think they can do that. And maybe, I would have to see them for the next 21 games buy into an identity, be committed to playing defense, be committing to getting good shots up. Obviously with LeBron, they'll do that. And Darvin Ham, for the longest, Darvin Ham wasn't seen as a viable playoff contending coach because of the small ball lineup that he was playing 3 guards and all that. So is his decision making going to be great? There are just so many ifs around that roster. Making the play-in, though, sure. OKC's there. The Warriors are without
They better
Steph
make
Curry.
the play-in.
Do you think they will?
Oh, I think they'll for sure. If they're healthy, there's no way they don't make the play. This is the last thing I'll say about it. They are a completely different team.
Agreed.
Their rotation is completely different. And above and beyond that, LeBron and Anthony Davis believe in this group now, which is something that didn't happen. Look, everything you've been saying about the Lakers as it pertains to before this trade deadline is absolutely true. They were bad. I pointed this out last night on my show. They've won back-to-back games in by double digits. That happened just twice total during the previous 2 seasons, including a back-to-back against like Oklahoma City and Houston, and then like another one against like San Antonio and Cleveland early last season or something like that. So literally, this is 2 teams that are at least in the top 10 in the Western Conference that they beat by double digits, with LeBron James and Anthony Davis not having to play big minutes. This is an entirely different basketball team than it was. So all I would say is I would like for people to treat this next 25 games essentially as a new team. Now, if over this 25 games or whatever, if they show lots of flaws, then yeah, if you factor that with the continuity, then you shouldn't be banking on them. But if they kick everyone's ass, right, and they're 45-37 going into the playoffs, you'd be foolish to think of them as a 45-37 team. They're
4 under 500 right now. They're 4 games.
They're 28-32, I think. So they'd have to go something like 19-5 down the stretch or something like that, which is a long shot. For the record, That's a long shot. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think the far more likely scenario is they go like, I don't know, like 15-9 or something out of whatever it is. But if they go 15-9, they'll get into the play and they'll be a 7 seed and they'll still be dangerous. But like, all I'm saying is I am trying to approach this team as a completely new team because it is. LeBron's playing a completely different role. LeBron and Anthony Davis basically had to force every single shot because of the lack of offensive skill. When really those 2 guys are more Swiss Army knives than they are that type of dude. So like, if especially with LeBron at this phase in his career when he can't do the floor raising that he used to do. So I would like to treat this as a clean slate. I understand that outside of Laker fans, that's a tough pill to swallow because a lot of people just dislike the Lakers, which I totally understand. But I'm a huge believer in LeBron James and Anthony Davis when healthy. I think they're surrounded by a complementary set of role players in a way that they didn't used to be, and I think they've got a chance here to prove a point here down the stretch.
Well, finally, before we wrap up, what are your thoughts on the Memphis Grizzlies right now? They obviously lost. They had a 15-point lead. I think Ja took 5 shots or something, and then I think Des 20. Jaren had a great block, but they just keep falling apart. It seems like when the moment just gets too tight, and it's just the youth, and it's their inexperience, it's just lack of a veteran, it's just their star player is just not ready to be a leader yet. Like, it's the coaching. What do you feel like what's going on with them?
I think it's just a lack of offensive skill. I really think it's that simple, specifically from the standpoint of shot creation. Their offense, time and time again, falls apart at the end of games when you trap them in the half court. It denigrates down to Ja Morant isolating from the top of the key. And like there are guys out there that can make shots, but as long as you can key up on Desmond Bane and they're playing big, like Jaren Jackson can get hot and make shots, but in late game situations, most defensive schemes are going to concede those shots to him.
Right.
Dylan Brooks is like literally one of the worst usage offensive players in the league. Like pick and rolls for him are producing points at like, I want to say like 0.6 of a point per possession, which is ridiculous. Like they're now Dylan Brooks, he's putting together a highlight reel of defense this year. That's kind of insane. Like he has led multiple stars to like multiple disastrous games. Like he's having a great defensive season, but their offense becomes too predictable at the end of games. It's way too easy to load up the paint on them. Like everybody remembers the Joel Embiid block last night, but if you watch that play, it wasn't just Joel. There was like 7 bodies around him. Like it's a miracle no one got hurt on that play. So them in Cleveland remind me a lot of each other. I think they're kind of like the mirror images of each other in each conference. Outstanding rim protection, which allows them to functionally put up good defensive numbers in the regular season. Bad backcourt defense, which makes it so that in late game situations and in the playoffs, they actually can't get stops because every good NBA coaching staff finds a way to scheme the rim protector away from the rim. Right. And then on the offensive end at the end of games, their guards are put in a tough spot where they have to do everything. You saw that again last night. Lamar Stevens missed a corner 3 in the first half of yesterday's game by 2 feet. Like literally left it like 2 feet short of the rim. Like their small forward position is just a log jam of guys who can score but can't defend, or can defend but can't score. And they ended up going with Isaac Okoro last night down the stretch, and they were ignoring him. Evan Mobley made a couple threes last night. On the season, he's in the high 20s for catch and shoot threes. Like you can load up on these guys in the paint, and as long as you can keep them in the half court, you're going to get better shots. Like in that Grizzlies game, it's Ja Morant ISO into 7 bodies versus Harden and Embiid pick and roll. Who's going to get better shots? Well, Philly closed the game on a 21-14 run, and they got the win.
Wow. Well, we also have a couple super chats. I think people wanted to reach out to you as well. We got a KB82 says, people compare Jokic triple-double to Russell's triple-double. The difference is the Nuggets are 22-0 when Joker gets a triple-double. And, Jason, do you see any similarity between this triple-double season from Joker and then maybe the 2016-17 triple-double season from Russell Westbrook?
No, not even a little bit. It's blasphemy, in my opinion. I mean,
wait, y'all didn't know. Jason is not the biggest like Russ guy. So,
gosh, this is tough. I want to be clear. I'm a Russ fan and have been over the course of his career. Like I was a huge fan of him when he was in Oklahoma City, and I have the utmost respect for his accomplishments in the NBA. But having rooted for him for the last year and a half, I've grown to dislike a bunch of specific parts of his game. And those things that I dislike about his game couldn't be further from the truth with Jokic. Jokic is so under control and such a good decision maker, and very much does everything for the betterment of the team rather than his own statistical achievement. And that some of those triple double seasons for Russ were like Steven Adams ignoring a free throw rebound so Russ could go get it, or things along those lines. Like it can get a little janky with the way that Russ was approaching it. To me, just overall, Jokic is a better player now than Russ has ever been. So I just don't see the comparison.
Right. And then I think another one's Matty the Martian says that, love the content, brother. Thanks for being on the grind. Hey, again, shout out to Jason. I was a fan of the show Hoops Tonight before we ever actually got a chance to interact. So this has just been it's even great for me to even be doing this. So, Jason, this has been an hour. I appreciate you giving an hour of your time to even just have this conversation. And we've gone through 6 different topics, and every single one of these segments has been excellent, bro. So your basketball mind is astute. Your knowledge of the game, the level of passion that you talk about the game with is amazing. So, I mean, you're doing what you're doing now, but it's only going to get even better from here, bro. So I appreciate you even lending your time to the platform, bro.
Anytime, man. Hey, Cam, I love talking basketball with you, man. So it's easy for me. It's an hour, but it's been a fun hour. Yeah, for sure. Hey, y'all, make sure y'all go and subscribe to Jason's show, Hoops Tonight, with the volume. You can find it on YouTube. You can find him on Twitter and such as well.
Excellent content, y'all. Make sure y'all subscribe to this channel, like, share, let the people know where you like to get your favorite NBA content, and we will see y'all soon. And we